Good morning, Jessica. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi, Dave. Hi,
Uh,
everyone.
Welcome back to episode 4 of Ask Jess and Dave.
Ask Jess and Dave. Yes, here we are. So, as usual, we have a great question today. I'm just going to jump right in and read it. How do we know when someone is claiming poly, but deep down they're looking for a way out of commitments or are bored with the current shape of what they've signed up for? For example, a family man who now wants to date younger women.
Mm,
Yes, that's a good one. And
juicy.
yeah, and like all of these, it's several questions usually baked in to one question, or we're going to have lots of answers for one question.
Yes.
So maybe we should shart off. Let's
We don't
not
want
shart ourselves, okay?
we don't
If you're
want to start by
listening to this,
sharding.
don't start with sharting. Let's start off with just defining what poly is. Some listeners absolutely know what that is. Some might not fully know. You want to take it or should I do it?
Well, what is the question is what is polyamory, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
hmm Go
Yeah.
for it.
Great. It is actually polyamory is many things. It's not one thing, but it means many loves. Polyamory is one way of practicing consensual non-monogamy. So let's back up. Consensual non-monogamy or ethical non-monogamy is an umbrella term for the many different ways people are practicing having more than one romantic partner or sexual partner. And everyone is consenting and aware and knowing that it's happening, it's not cheating. And so poly is often used as a synonym for non monogamy. Technically, polyamory or polyam is referring to really being in love with more than one person, having more in love, attachment based types of relationships. Whereas some people are maybe doing swinging or open marriage or open relationship, different kinds of polyamory, like solo polyamory, hierarchical, non-hierarchical. There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a whole genre. It's a
It's
whole
a whole,
culture. It's very wide range in terms of the possibilities and scope, and it's different for everybody. And
yes,
it's a very rich universe.
yes, exactly. So in this case, how do you know if someone's claiming they're poly, but deep down they're just looking a way out of their commitments? So we're talking in this case, it sounds like people who are in a marriage together and someone is wanting to open up the marriage, saying they're poly, but this person sounds suspicious that maybe they're really just wanting to get out of their commitments or they're bored with the marriage.
hmm
How do you know?
Well, there's different distinctions I think that are potentially helpful to make. One that I really love that you made a long time ago, and I can't remember if you created this or if this is something that you picked up on. But the difference between lifestyle and orientation.
Hmm.
That can be, I think, a helpful place to start just to give people more context of what are the ways that people relate to polyamory and how does it become more of something that someone's taking seriously, an extension of their sense of self. Are they doing it in a way that's genuinely ethical, and grounded in principle and value versus sort of an impulse or reaction to circumstances. So I'm curious to hear what you say about that.
Yeah, well, in Polysecure, I laid out a spectrum of polyamory or non-monogamy as a lifestyle on one end. Actually, it's sort of monogamy and then lifestyle, and then polyamory is like the full spectrum. And people on either end of the spectrum, whether they're monogamous or polyamorous, this is through lots of qualitative interviews that I was doing and a lot of case client, working with clients. On either end, they sort of said the same thing. And I thought that was very interesting, right? That they weren't choosing to be monogamous or polyamorous. That's just who they were. It felt like who they were wired to be. And similar to when people describe their sexual orientation, right? They're not necessarily choosing to be attracted to a certain gender or body or genitals or sex or all of it. It just feels like that's how it is. This is what is, right? But then there was all these people in the middle who didn't feel like they were fundamentally wired one way or the other. They felt like it was a choice they could make, a lifestyle that, yes, I could have more than one partner, or I could be with one partner for a while, or I like going to play parties occasionally, or I'm post-divorce and I'm going through a phase of dating a lot of people and it's really amazing and I'm learning all this stuff about myself as a non-monogamous lifestyle, right? It was sort of all of it. Yeah. So that's what you're getting at the spectrum is that people can be choosing this or stepping into it as who they are from many different places. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because the question sort of frames the situation as if, you know, someone's trying to leverage or utilize the desire to be or go polyam in a way that seems to be obscuring some other truth, right? Like there's something that's not being named, there's something that's not being expressed for what it is. So it's interesting to me to think about it in the context of that distinction, that range, that spectrum that you're naming, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think in essence, this question is getting at like, is someone truly polyamorous or polycurious, or are they being relationally avoidant?
Right.
And I think what we need to understand is that non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy, this adds obligation to our life. Like
Mhm.
through the wonderfulness of adding more partners, it adds um, more work to do. Basically, we're now more accountable to more people. We need to be more transparent. We need to be in dialogue. We need to be doing the emotional labor of multiple relationships now,
Right.
which is different than like the escape hatch of I want to actually do less. Can I do less of that work and just have things be easier?
Yeah. And so I think that's interesting because within the range of the spectrum that you named, some people I've heard say there's more weight or more priority or more validity, quote unquote, to someone making the claim that this is an orientation, this is my
Yeah.
identity versus a lifestyle. And so I'm curious about, the validity of both, right? That both of them are legitimate options, right? Both of them have merit, both of them have, in terms of, those poles, importance to the lived experience of individuals, but it's really how does both sides approach that kind of more work situation, right? Even
Yeah.
if you're just doing the lifestyle thing and it's more of kind of a situational, this is something that I like, this is something I'm experimenting with, but not necessarily identifying with, it still requires what you're saying, more work.
More
So
work.
both sides of the
Yeah.
spectrum actually require you to up level certain facets of your own relational and emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're doing it, if you're already partnered and you're doing it alone and you have to be processing more with your pre-existing partner and now new partners, or even if a partner is going to play parties together now and or exploring with a third, right, there's still a lot more conversations to have. Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot more feelings that come up, a lot more attunement that wasn't sort of as necessary sometimes before.
yeah,
Yeah. So I think, right, this person wants to know, how do you know? Well, I would assess, right? When this person says they're wanting to be poly, are they looking to have actually more novelty and do less work in relationship and not actually put in the effort that it's going to require with you or with the others to deal with the increased complexity of non-monogamy? Right? I think too, if we're talking about a long-standing marriage or a marriage with a family, and someone is maybe interested in younger people, and they want a way out of their commitments, what do I want to say? Like, yes, are people in the world married and bringing now poly in as a way to bring in more novelty and like have more fun and experiences and feel more alive again because they're really in the soup of monotony and family life and like the monogamous long-term relationship where, there's been certain things that haven't been happening for a while. It's kind of like a life raft for the marriage.
Hmm. Or an
Yeah.
imagined life raft.
An imagine life raft. So it makes sense, right? That someone would be like, hey, can we try this? Maybe this will work. Maybe this will help.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
actually talk about that phenomenon in our book that we co-authored together, Polywise, where people often project an ideal or an imagined life circumstance of more freedom, more passion, more excitement, ethical non-monogamy or polyamorous exploration can often present sort of an alluring or seductive promise of something really spectacular and enlivening. And yet, what we've seen over and over again with clients is that it often becomes something much more complex, much more
Yeah.
difficult, can actually make things worse,
Yeah.
make things harder because now you're having to deal with all of this new level of complexity. And I think this is something that I'm really wanting people to understand that this is not going to be the solution to years of
Right.
entrenched patterning and issues between not getting needs met and the way that we communicate and not really understanding how to resolve conflict skillfully. This is going to make all of those things much harder, most likely.
Yeah. So I think in terms of this question, what I would want to pose back to the asker is, do you feel like they're not fulfilling their commitments with you or the family that you have together? Are they tending to you? Are they tuning into you and the family in ways that feel fulfilling to everyone? Right. Or, yeah, is that spark kind of gone? Do you all feel bored with each other? Have you been tending to the romantic or sexual spark of the relationship?
Hmm.
Yeah. And that it's, if either one of you still wants that in the pre-existing relationship, that's great. Then the request is, can we tend to that and try to revive that? It can happen at the same time while you're exploring other partners. But if one of you is just giving it outside the relationship and not bringing it into the relationship or feeding the relationship, yeah, it doesn't work usually. It's too painful.
Yeah, and it usually is the on-ramp to separation or
Yeah.
divorce, typically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we talked about it a few episodes ago in the sexless marriage. Maybe that was even the last one. That if, everyone's mutually agreeing, we don't want these aspects of our marriage and we're fine with that and we are going to go get it elsewhere. Okay, great. That works for you. But, the fact that this person is even, that you're even asking tells me it's not about whether you're right or not. You are feeling something is off. That's
Mm.
what I want to point you to. Something isn't lining up for you of what your partner is saying and what your partner is doing and how they're showing up for you. And the more you like, the less you can make it about whether they are poly or not poly, or whether they're trying to run away and, just fuck a 20-year-old. Like, it's not as much about that as what are you experiencing that does feel off. And that's the conversation I want you to have.
Yeah. What are the needs? What are the
Right.
attachment needs that aren't getting met specifically? What are
Yeah.
the asks that you would make? What are the conversations that you're wanting to have that haven't happened or erupt when you try to have them?
Yeah, exactly. And can you two allow a conversation that says, yeah, is the romance dead? And can it be revived or no, it's dead? Or are we just not a good match in that department?
Right. Do you
To
even
me,
want to try? Is there enough willingness or capacity to try and revive that and commit to a process, which probably won't be fast or easy and it's probably going to bring up a lot of shit for both of you?
yeah, totally. And sometimes the fear and stigma of divorce is still bigger than the fear and stigma of polyamory.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And upending a family life, like that's no
Small.
small undertaking. Yeah.
No, and there's a lot of social metaphors, attached to that stigma or metaphors that are attached to that social stigma that really make it hard for people to even consider possibilities that may down the road work once you've gotten through the hard part of separation or divorce. But, thinking about separation, divorce as a failure or
Right.
a death, you know, while it is a loss, it's not either of those two things. And I think culturally, socially, we need new metaphors for describing this process of changing, de-escalating, renegotiating, right? The attachment and the terms of relationships that are complex and have decades of a life entwinement, especially when kids are in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also something I want to offer in terms of reflection of things that I've seen. Like if we take the question at face value, what are some of the tells that people are, I don't know if I'd use the original frame per se, but what are some of the tells that people are not doing or relating to polyamory or ethical or consensual non-monogamy in ways that I would advocate for,
Yeah.
and
Right. Or in this case where it is sort of just you're bored or you're looking to get out of your commitments. Yeah. And you're
yeah,
not necessarily really trying to take on the paradigm of, open relating and all that comes with it.
yes,
So this would be someone who's not really willing to have much of the conversations about it. They might espouse their opinion and now their new philosophy, but they're not really listening to you. They're not allowing the space for your feelings or your questions or your hurt around it. It could be that it's okay for them to date, but not necessarily okay for you to date. That might be like there might be an imbalance in there. Yeah, I'm wondering if this person asking, is it okay if they go date someone who's,
yeah,
20
that's a
years
good
younger?
question. One of the things
Hmm.
that's a big red flag for me is pace,
Yeah,
and urgency. Often
yeah,
you'll see needs that are expressed in ways like, I need freedom. We often see this on the freedom side. One of the things that
yeah,
we talk about a lot in this work
yeah,
is the difference between the fundamental needs of freedom, independence, and autonomy. That's sort of one end of the spectrum. And on the other is safety, predictability, trust, right? Consistency in the attachment. And so these are interesting poles on the spectrum. And a lot of times, what I see is partners who really aren't grounded in the principles of caring for the relational ecosystems that they're already embedded in often are moving too fast in the name of freedom
yeah,
and exploration. Right? It's like, I've been wanting this. I've been waiting for this. This is what, has been underneath the surface. And now that I'm in touch with it, I can't wait.
yeah.
And so that's a pretty big giveaway that someone's really not grounded in a journey that's about taking care of the attachment systems that are involved and trying to just scratch an itch.
Right, right. In some ways, right, the escape valve from their commitments, and they're trying to act like a single person.
Right. Or a teenager, which brings me back to the Keegan's model of development,
Yep.
that we talk about in the book Polywise, where often when people start their journey in polyam, they start to go backwards in terms of stage of development and start to actually embody what we would call the imperial stage of consciousness, which looks a lot like kind of a unhinged or reckless adolescent.
Yeah, well, it is in the stages of human adult development. It's this adolescent imperial stage, and then the next stage is about the social mind and being an adult, and then it keeps going. So it is people kind of do this slide back, and they're usually what I see is they're trying to reclaim parts of them that never got fully expressed in adolescence,
Yeah.
that
Or
didn't get go ahead.
or earlier stages of the marriage
Yeah,
or other relationships.
right, exactly. And it doesn't always stay that way, but there can be this stage of a few months to a year or so where you're like, whoa, where'd you go? Or someone is just advocating for what they want, how they want it, when they want it, without any, consideration.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's shocking. It's shocking and overwhelming, and heartbreaking for partners to see someone that they've known for decades all of a sudden
Yeah.
embody and sort of backslide into a more regressed state of relational consciousness. That's a really intense and rupturous thing for a lot of partners. And I've seen that a
Yeah.
lot. We're like,
Yeah.
who are you? And the other person not identifying that as a part of themselves that hasn't been developed yet starts to really respond to the other person's strong response and say, well, you don't want me to be me. You don't want me to really live my truth. And
Right.
it really creates some pernicious cycles where parts get stuck in dialogues that feel very intractable.
Yeah. I agree.
Hmm.
Yeah, I also think there's cases where, let's see, let me just look at the question again. Um, there are cases where a little bit of novelty on the side just sort of does work for the whole system. I want to make sure that gets a little voice too. I definitely see marriages where, and I think is, well, it's not always both sides actually. But one or both partners, they go to a play party once a season or once a month, or they go to temple night together, or that there is sort of a other experience outside of the original partnership. And it really does like bring in a certain aliveness and novelty from that person. They are doing it consensually because it's with other people that are consenting. And it's great.
Right. And when I hear you say that, that sounds like someone exploring in a way that's not based on cultivating attachment-based
Usually not.
relationships.
Yeah, usually not. Right. They might have an ongoing connection and there's a sense of care and friendship even in that, or there is one-off experiences. And it's clear though, the ethics in that is we're clear that's what this is.
Right.
Yeah.
The trick is there's a risk there, right?
Always.
There's always
Yes.
a risk, and people often say, this is what it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's only going to be casual. It's not going to be attached to base. I'm not looking for new connections. And a partner will say, that's really scary to me. And the other partner will say, but that's not what I'm doing. This will never be that. And I want people to have access to the concept of sharing risk. And I don't advocate for people to say, I guarantee you that this is what it's going to look like down the road because that I know myself or I know what I
Yeah.
want. I know who I am. I really want partners to be able to say to the partner who's feeling the risk and the threat of that possibility to say, I want everyone in that equation to be able to, yeah, it is risky. Yeah, we're running a risk together. This is our intention, and even intentions change and there's always unpredictable elements. So I think I'm wanting people to just have access, even if they are going to lean into an experimental phase or process, that really they're able to sit with a partner who's carrying the risk and not in a way that's dismissive, but actually
Yeah.
acknowledging it. Because that will do more for both of your nervous systems and create more capacity for conversations that are going to be important if things do change.
Right.
Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. For just as many times as I've seen like more of a open relating work, I've seen a situation where people are like, I'm not going to fall in love. And then they're putting themselves in, dating or play parties, and then they completely fall in love. And of course, ultimately, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it becomes a big issue in that relationship because that wasn't allowed, right?
Right.
It's going against what was agreed.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to say, Dave, about how do we know when someone is claiming poly, but deep down they're looking for a way out of their commitments or they're bored with what they've signed up for? And this example is a family man who wants to date younger women. We didn't really talk about the younger phenomenon.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting to me. For me, there's again a spectrum of possibilities. I think from what I've heard from clients, especially, some men are looking for like, what does a younger woman represent?
Yeah,
And what's the reality of a younger woman, right? Like in terms of just even phases of life.
Yeah,
It's
right.
really interesting to hear men who have done this talk about sort of once they're able to really get through to the vulnerability, what was it that was drawing them to women that are younger, right?
Yeah.
And often it is, right, symbolic of a phase of life where there's more freedom, spontaneity, there's not the same kind of crushing responsibility or monotony of the routine. There's not the same accumulated just complexity of the issues relationally between, right, you and that younger woman, right? It's sort of like a etch-a-sketching your sort of relationship to a sexual dynamic where you're not having to process all the emotional stuff. So for me, just wanting to acknowledge, like, yeah, the impulse makes a lot of sense given a lot of men's lived experience. But if that's not really harvested and reckoned with and processed and talked about and just unconscious and just driving the experience, often what I see is that it runs into a wall,
Hmm.
right? Where there's either just shallow relating or there's a way in which that difference of phase of relationship, and life stage really starts to catch up.
Right. I think the age gap with adults, there's usually this window where it works. And there can
Hmm.
be a pretty vast window. It can be
Yeah.
25 years where you're like, yeah, someone in this age, it can work. And then one of them shifts into a different phase of life and it stops working, whether it's that the younger person now wants children or wants marriage that they can't get from this person because that person already has children in marriage or a home or whatever it is. Or someone is, I've seen it on the other end, someone's retiring and they're wanting to now reinvent, the third part of their life. And they're in their 60s, their partner's in their 40s, who's in a totally different way of being. Yeah, so it's true. There's this window that might overlap and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there can also be a way that there's a power dynamic. If we're specifically talking about older men and younger women, not the other way around, right? There's this power dynamic where, yeah, most likely a younger woman may not know herself as well or advocating for her needs. And there's things she's not speaking up about, right? Doesn't all of that at play? Yeah, there's a lot of power dynamics that can make it pretty muddy.
Yeah, and to be fair, there's everyone's different in terms of their own relative degree of emotional and relational intelligence.
Yeah,
Sometimes the age is just a number, and people are more closely aligned in terms of their own levels of
their
development. And
psychology. Yeah.
there's a certain kind of parallel or alignment that really suits, right, that coupling of individuals. So I don't want to rule that out that can't be. I don't, for me,
No,
it's
I see
not
it
just
work.
about ages per se,
Yeah.
like this is the cutoff and this is where it's acceptable or I'd advocate for it. It's a very particular thing. And yet I'm talking about generalized patterns based on what I see my clients bringing to me. I also want to name too that, right, at least in the United States, we're socialized in very particular ways.
Yeah.
And so there's a way in which our society really idealizes youth, creates a
Hmm.
lot of two-dimensional projections of youth. I think pornography really sort of and celebrity culture really exacerbates this, right? There's this idea of what a woman's body is supposed to look like or their level of passion and interest, right? And sexual appetite and desire. And so this is an interesting facet that I wouldn't want to not mention, that I wouldn't want to avoid and not speak on because this plays in for a lot of clients who are struggling with something like this or dealing with a dynamic like this.
Yeah. And I see it come into where um I'm just going through all these different examples in my head of people that, a new female partner is significantly younger than the man or his pre-existing other female partners. And it can make this comparison that someone wasn't struggling with around how they look, their body, their youth. Yeah,
Yeah. And the
affect
question of
someone.
appetite, it's
Yeah.
interesting, right? When men are saying, I just have a different appetite or I just have a higher libido and I need my needs met. My sort of current partner who's closer to my age and stage of life doesn't want the same thing or can't meet those needs, right? It's often interesting that I will see that, right, men are not attuning to certain relational or emotional issues within the relationship that really need to get tended to. And this is where I think some of the question of bypassing really comes in is it's framed as if my libido is different. And often
Mm-hmm.
the female partner saying, my libido would be very different if you were able to attend to some
If
of
there
these.
was emotional safety and repair, basically, yeah.
Right. So it becomes this catch-22 where needs feel like they're being positioned against each other versus could we sequence, right, a certain level of work on the relationship to leverage, right, more openness to sexual connection. But that often requires a lot of vulnerability that not everyone's ready for or has the capacity to really lean into. So wanting to make sure that that's explicit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this will bring in some follow-up questions on any of the things we covered. Any final words?
Great question. Thank you for the question. And if that person who, which I'm assuming wrote the question, is dealing with that, just yeah, I feel a lot of empathy for the challenge of that. That's not an easy thing to figure out.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. I think my advice is actually to trust that something is off and make it less about who are they poly or not? What are they exactly doing versus what are you needing? What are you feeling is off? How are they showing up or not? How do you need to show up or not? Yeah,
Yeah.
and go that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Submit your questions. We will answer them to Jess and Dave at the as is it Ask Jess and Dave at
Ask
the
Jess and Dave at
it's here on the
theazuriteway.com.
bottom.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.